Hello, everyone. Looks like folks are still trickling in, but I'll kick us off now that we're at 2 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us today for our State of the Industry update. Today's session will be hosted by Cy Kilborn, and we'll be discussing the state of the 45L tax credit. And we've done some research into how the new tax credit requirements have affected builders thus far, what the compliance rates look like. And so we'll go through all of that and then go through some opportunities for the industry to move forward and hopefully close some of the compliance gaps that we're seeing. Thank you all for joining today, and I'll pass it off to Cy.
Thanks, Sarah. Happy to be here. And Sarah has mentioned to me that we had record-breaking registrations and participation. So just really thankful that everyone is interested in the topic and wanted to join. I'll try to take about 45 minutes to go through some of the updates that we have here and the research that we've done, to leave 15 minutes or so for questions at the end of the call. Sarah will be collecting questions. So if you have any throughout the presentation, just type them into the questions section of the Zoom, and she'll collect them, and we'll try to get through them all at the end of the webinar. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. 45L, obviously a very hot topic these days, based on the updates from the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. So we'll talk all about that, but a quick agenda of what we're going to try to cover today. Just a very brief intro to Ekotrope. I think most of the folks on the call are probably familiar with us. Then we'll talk about that updated 45L tax credit and the drop that we are seeing and projecting in terms of compliance, total compliance numbers for builders. Talk about what that means for builders and what's causing the drop, and then talk a little bit about opportunities that exist to increase that 45L tax credit compliance, to try to get us back up to the numbers that we were seeing, and we'll go into Q&A as I mentioned. So a little bit about us. Ekotrope provides the nation's #1 HERS rating tool, HERS rating software tool. So we're used on approximately 1 out of 4 new homes each year. And that also includes 45L. As most of the folks on the call probably know, 45L is mainly accessed via HERS rating these days. And we also support over 50 different utility programs, new home construction utility programs nationwide. So that's kind of where our experience and where our research comes from on this topic. So let's jump right into the 45L tax credit. Apologies for, I'm sure some of the folks on this webinar are quite familiar with the tax credit already. I suspect some are not. So I'm going to go through a brief overview of what the tax credit is. So essentially there are, for the 45L tax credit got extended in the Inflation Reduction Act at the end of last year. It got extended for 10 years, which is fantastic. We've never had that type of extension recently. And recently we were just seeing, year-to-year extensions, sometimes even retroactive. And so it was very difficult for builders to rely on this tax credit. But now we have that 10-year extension. We have some real stability, and we have the ability to plan for it. Builders have the ability to plan for it and build it into their businesses, which is fantastic. That extension also came with some very significant changes to the 45L tax credit requirements and to the payouts. So there are now 2 different qualification tiers. One is based on Energy Star. One is based on DOE Zero Energy Ready. So the DOE Zero Energy Ready qualification tier is twice double the amount of the tax credit of the Energy Star. And then there's also two classes of dwelling units that result in different tax credits. So the top class of dwelling unit is single family homes, as well as multifamily homes that qualify as prevailing minimum wage construction. And then the second class of dwelling units or homes is any other multifamily and manufactured homes. So that top class is going to be eligible for $2,500 for Energy Star, $5,000 for DOE Zero Energy Ready. And then the next class would be 500 and 1,000. So quite a significant step down in terms of the dollar amounts on the tax credits. So this little grid on the right here is a quick summary of that. Now I've written Energy Star and DOEs or Energy Ready homes here as the qualification tiers. Right now, those thresholds are Energy Star 3.1 and DOEs or Energy Ready version 1, with the exception of a few states where there are state-specific requirements. But both of those are changing. Energy Star will change to Energy Star 3.1 in the near future, and DOEs or Energy Ready criteria will change to version 2 for all homes that are acquired or more or less sold starting January 1st of 2024. So that would be homes that are already under construction, in many cases are going to be sold in 2024 and would be under DOEs or Energy Ready version 2 to qualify for that tax credit. And those are going to continue to change. We don't have full clarity on the next 10 years as far as how those thresholds will change, but they will change. The EPA and the DOE are continuously innovating and updating their program to be more stringent. So, when we think of 45L, most people think about what I just talked about, those tiers of tax credits, $2,500 per home, $5,000 per home. However, I think a lot gets lost behind that buzz around tax credits, because building to qualify for the 45L tax credit means you're really building a really high quality home. The Energy Star program is a really well-crafted program. The EPA folks have done a really good job to make sure that if you're following that track, you're building a high performance home. And so as an ancillary benefit of meeting the tax credit, you get a lot of good stuff. And the same with Zero Energy Ready homes track. So just a few things to mention that are beyond that tax credit. There's more ancillary revenue to be gained, because a lot of utility programs across the country and even state incentives have developed their programs in such a way that if you achieve the 45L tax credit, you can actually get more money beyond that tacked on from utility programs and others. So that's something to absolutely be aware of. You're also building a very high construction quality home, which means you're going to be minimizing warranty and customer service and comfort issues, minimizing disruptions to purchasing and construction processes, because you're typically building an above code home as well. So as codes change, as energy codes change, you may not be disrupted as much as other builders because you are a step ahead, right? And you have some buffer time to be able to react to those code changes because you may already be meeting the new energy code that gets adopted. Marketing and sales, absolutely, because of these programs are based on Energy Star and DOEs or Energy Ready, you're going to be able to piggyback on those programs and use their marketing assets and collateral and market these homes as energy efficient and high quality. And finally, for builders, improving their ESG portfolios and thereby value to investors. So that environmental, social, and governance. The environmental is a big aspect of that, and qualifying for 45L is a nice thing to tout in terms of your ESG portfolio. So that's a quick summary of the 45L tax credit and why it is an important thing in our industry and important for builders. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we are seeing a drop in 45L compliance from 2022 to 2023. All right, and what does that drop look like? This is a difficult thing to measure. Specifically, the numbers for 2022 are difficult to measure because they aren't publicly reported across the country. With the 2022 rule set, a HERS rating was not technically required in order to get 2022 compliance, and there were a lot of other ways that builders were leveraging this tax credit. However, based on our conversations, based on information from our market partners, from our work with builders and the information that they've shared with us, and from publicly available information. What we're estimating in terms of 2022 capture amounts was around $500 million nationally across all builders for the 45L tax credit. And what we're projecting in 2023, which is based on much more solid metrics that we're able to actually measure based on rating numbers from 2023 up to mid-year and extrapolating that out to the end of the year, we're projecting around $250 million, just slightly over $250 million in 45L rebate capture. So that's a drop in compliance by almost 50% here, about 50%. And that represents a $250 million loss in terms of tax credits claimed by the industry. You know, that isn't really, you look at that and you say, wow, the 45L tax credit has really shrank in terms of its impact. That isn't really how we see it. We don't see it as, you know, 45L tax credit is more of a niche thing now or less accessible. It is changed, the requirements have changed, but you know, it is actually having a positive impact on the industry. And the way we see it is that the industry just needs to adjust and adapt to the new requirements. Builders need time to change, but we will be able to get there in terms of those capture rates in the future. And we'll talk a little bit about when that might happen. But if we look at this chart, what we're looking at is month by month percentage of HERS ratings that are meeting Energy Star 3.1, getting certified to Energy Star 3.1. This is a 2-year outlook. And you can see there's some steady increase between, you know, mid 2021 and mid 2023. But then right, you know, from the beginning of 2023 to now, there's a really significant spike upward in these past 6 months, right? Something that, you know, an increase rate that we have not seen at any period in the past 2 years. So it's clear to us that the 45L is having an impact on builders complying and getting certified to Energy Star 3.1. And so we think that we will start to see that trend continue and start to regain some of that gap that we're seeing in 45L capture rates. So, you know, thinking back on that $250 million or the lower compliance and 45L tax credits, what does that mean for builders? And, you know, obviously it means less tax credits for builders, but question is, how is it going to be distributed? Is that going to hit certain builders more than other builders? And what does it mean beyond the tax credit losses? So let's dig into those two questions just a little bit here. So this is a case study with one particular top 10 builder who is projected in 2023 to see a reduction of about $16 million in 2023 from 45L tax credits. So obviously that's a really big number, even for a top 10 builder. $16 million is nothing to sniff at all. And you know, we think that this is indicative of how other big builders will be impacted as well. We do think that the reduction in compliance is probably going to hit the biggest builders harder than the smaller builders, because those builders were able to leverage the 45L tax credit a little bit in stronger ways in 2022 and earlier. However, there are also going to be builders, including, you know, top 10, top 20 builders who are going to see a net benefit here because they've already kind of designed their portfolio around Energy Star, and even DOEs are Energy Ready. And so they're going to see 100% or nearly 100% compliance rates. So it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag. But I think the big builders who have not designed for 100% Energy Star compliance are probably going to see the biggest impact in terms of lost tax credit dollars. Beyond the dollars, you know, obviously that results in a higher tax liability. For the one top 10 builder case study, we were looking at an increase of 0.69 or 69 basis points in terms of their effective tax rate increasing in 2023 due to that change, but also lower marketability. If builders are missing this Energy Star and 45L tax credit, builders really are, or home buyers rather, are really demanding energy efficient homes in some markets and some climates. And so you lose some of that marketability, and also ESG goals. A lot of builders have been using 45L to benefit their ESG programs. And so missing that will have an impact that they'll have to rebuild. So what's causing the drop, right? We just looked at a very large drop in terms of compliance rates. There are several things that are causing the drop in compliance rates. Probably the biggest impact is these two items at the top together. Okay, so in 2022 and earlier, there was a bit of gray area in terms of what was required in order to capture this tax credit and claim credit. Builders were finding alternate paths beyond, HERS rating software to be able to increase compliance numbers. There was a really significant amount of homes going through those types of systems. And now in 2023, with the change in the tax credit, those alternative compliance paths have more or less disappeared. An official registered rating, like a resident HERS rating, is required now to determine and prove compliance, and so that comes along with the requirements of Energy Star that are, you can no longer kind of find alternative ways to get to compliance. So like I said, along with that are the Energy Star mandatory requirements. Even if a builder is building to a high performance level, they still need to be able to check all those Energy Star boxes and get that official rating completed. And then finally, it's just a different standard. It's a different compliance criteria. So Resident Publication 001 required a different energy performance than Energy Star 3.1. In many cases, it's actually not even necessarily a more stringent standard. Depends on the climate and the build style. However, it does come along with all these top 3 items that are going to cause that drop in compliance numbers. So if we look at a breakdown of this a little bit deeper, I think this is a really interesting chart to look at. So this is looking at all of the Ekotrope registered HERS ratings through 2023, which is about 80 to 85% of all HERS ratings done nationwide. We can break them into 4 different categories. So first category is this green, which is passing Energy Star 3.1. These homes are actually getting certified to Energy Star 3.1, and that represents about 34% of all HERS ratings. The next category, as we go kind of counterclockwise here, and so these greens would be getting that 45L tax credit. Next category here is this yellow. These are homes that actually meet the target ERI score. So they meet the performance requirement for Energy Star 3.1 and the tax credit. However, they're not certified to Energy Star because they have not gone through and passed those mandatory requirements. So potential low-hanging fruit there, that's 30%, which is very significant. So we're looking at 64% of homes are passing the performance bar for Energy Star. Then we've got another 16% of homes that are failing the performance, but they're within 5% of passing. So if we take a 5% threshold, that brings another, or 5% margin, that brings another 16% of homes into it. And then we've got this red category, which is 20% of homes are further away than 5%. So they've got a little bit more of a ways to go to get to compliance. But 80% of homes are either passing or within 5% of passing that performance. So to me, this is a pretty eye-opening chart in terms of what's possible. So following that thread, let's just look at this 30% category here, the category that meets the performance requirements, but fails the mandatory requirements, and try to understand what those homes are and where they're being built. So here's a map. If we just take those 30%, put them on a map state by state, and the states with more homes are darker green. All right. State that jumps out is Texas. Not a huge surprise there because of the raw number of homes that Texas is building. So, you know, you're going to expect quite a bit of any metric to be in Texas. But the other states that are showing significant numbers, starting over here on the east, is Massachusetts. Very high number of homes in Massachusetts, probably because of the stretch code there that requires a very low HERS rating, but doesn't require Energy Star mandatory items. Then we've got good chunks of these homes, which I'm calling, you know, kind of these low-hanging fruit for just needing to meet the mandatory requirements over in the Mid-Atlantic. Minnesota, big chunk in Minnesota, Colorado as well, Arizona and Nevada are kind of the hot spots as I see them. Overall, this is 44,000 homes and represents $110 million in tax credits that could be captured just by completing the Energy Star mandatory requirements. And that's just to date this year. That's not a projection for all of 2023. That's just to date. And we still have 5 months left in the year to increase those numbers. So, you know, nearly doubling those would be annualized. Just another way to look at those states in terms of potential dollars for those homes left on the table. Here's a bar chart of the top 5 states. Again, Texas in the lead, but all these states are over $10 million in terms of the potential capture. So that's kind of the first low-hanging fruit category. Second category would be these homes that are not passing the performance requirements, but they're close. They're within 5%. That's 16% of homes right here. Again, let's look at the map and understand where those homes are. We see, you know, some similarities. Texas still very large. However, Minnesota and Massachusetts have pretty much disappeared, telling us that, you know, most of the homes in those states are actually passing the performance requirements. Still a decent number in Arizona, and North Carolina really shines here as the next biggest state in terms of these homes. This is 23,000 nationally and represents $57 million in tax credits. Okay, so let's talk about, you know, we've segmented these homes out into different categories. I think I've illustrated the point that there is significant opportunity on the table. Let's talk about how we might get these homes to increase 45L tax credit. So step one is not a huge surprise here. It's the mandatory checklists, right? We just saw that there's a 30% of homes that are in this category of just needing to meet the mandatory requirements. These can be somewhat daunting depending on who you are in this ecosystem. I think raters generally tend to understand them pretty well, especially raters that are doing a lot of Energy Star compliance. Builders and product manufacturers, it can be a bit more daunting. What I would say is, so just an overview of the checklists. There are rater checklists, 2 different rater checklists, the design review and the field checklist. Then there's a builder checklist for the National Water Management System. And then there are HVAC checklists. And there's 2 different options here. There's a HVAC grading option and a HVAC credential option. So there's different checklists, different requirements for each. And so, you know, it looks a little bit overwhelming, but these checklists really aren't too long. They're maybe 1 to 3 pages each. I would encourage you, if you're not super familiar with these, just to read them once or twice or even 3 times, just to kind of internalize some of the stuff, some of the language, some of the things that are being emphasized. even if you're not planning to be an expert in this, but you want to have a general understanding. I'm going to give a real quick, probably way too brief overview of just the rater checklist, because the rater checklists are a really big piece of this. So if I look at the rater design and field checklist and really just try to kind of like pull out a few of the key items that I think are critical for people to be aware of, here are the things that come to mind, or that surface to the top for me as I go through these checklists. So duct installation and insulation quality, as well as leakage requirements. There are CFM 25 requirements for ducts that need to be met. Then there's a section of envelope insulation requirements. In general, the home needs to be better than the 2009 IECC UA. So that's actually, not a super high standard in terms of a backstop for the UA for the envelope. There's also an option where if you go with an improved air sealing, a lower ACH 50, you can get additional leniency on that envelope. Then there's the grade 1 insulation or continuous insulation requirement. This is an important one to highlight because even if you install grade 1 as a builder, if it is not inspected by a rater at pre-drywall, the home's disqualified. You cannot miss the pre-drywall inspection and certify for Energy Star. That's a really important item. And there are even cases, where a builder has had to pull drywall down to do that inspection. It's not pretty. So that's a really important one to know. You got to get that inspected. And then finally, there's a requirement for the envelope here. You got to do either advanced framing techniques, and that's spelled out in detail in the Energy Star checklists, or you've got to do continuous insulation. And the R value of that is different for different climate zones. Also have to do proper air sealing and proper air barriers, which is spelled out in detail in these checklists. Mechanical ventilation needs to be within 15% of the design report, and Energy Star HVAC contractors and design reports, or the HVAC grading. So like I said, there's two options here, need to be completed. And I think this is a duplicate down here below. So these are really the key items. I'm not a field inspector, and so there are many more knowledgeable than me about these mandatory requirements. And if you're a builder, I would highly encourage you to talk to your rater to understand these better, but also to review these checklists in detail. So that was step 1, especially for those 30% of homes. Step 2 would be considering some general upgrades to boost that performance. So these would be for homes that are not meeting the performance requirements, but may be close, or even homes that may not be that close. And there's dozens or even hundreds of different ways to improve the performance of a home. I've just called out 6 items here just for kind of food for thought, as items that we've seen are common areas where builders are investing, or even if they're not common, we've seen them to be high impact areas. So heat pump water heaters, still really low market adoption in terms of new home penetration, but they do make a big impact in terms of that HERS index and performance. ERVs, very similar. We're starting to see more market adoption. These can be a bit of a mix. We've seen extremely high benefit in some areas, some climates for ERVs. And then we've also seen in some cases, depending on the current ventilation strategy and the climate, they may not give any benefit because of the wattage that's being consumed. So this is a good one to check on for your portfolio and your region. Reduced air leakage also, and there's a number of ways to do this, from just sealing to using a product like Aero Barrier to using spray foam. So there are different solutions there. Continuous insulation as well can have a really high impact and can be a bit of a game changer to add R3 or R5 continuous insulation to the envelope. High efficiency HVAC systems, And another big one here that we're seeing a lot of builders look to as kind of their next step for major efficiency changes is bringing those ducts into the conditioned space. Sealing them well is one thing, which is valuable, but bringing them into conditioned space is kind of that next step and is providing quite a bit of benefit. So if we take those 6 items and we try to look at these 16% of homes. So again, these are 16% of homes that were failing the performance path, but were within 5% of hitting that performance target. So if we take those homes and we apply these 6 different potential upgrades that I just talked about, we just did this exercise to understand, what does it take to get these homes over that threshold, right? So each of these rows is taking all those homes, applying this change, and figuring out, all right, what percentage of those homes would pass with this change. So four of these changes, 1, 2, 3, and 5, if we apply just those changes to that set of homes, we get over 75% of those failed homes over the threshold to be passing the performance targets. So pretty significant, and it gives you a sense of, the gap, the 5% gap is not that big. And then finally, items 4 and item 6, we still get over 50% of those failed homes into the passing category. So if we think about these homes as, going from $0 in 45L to $2,500 in 45L, and we look at these upgrades, it depends how you install these things, but most of these upgrades, if not all of them, are typically going to be less than $2,500. And so there really is some low-hanging fruit in terms of getting these homes that are on the border to passing. You do obviously need to look at the mandatory checklist as well, which is a bit of a shift in terms of builder processes sometimes. But I think there are going to be a lot of these homes where there's a net positive ROI. So again, looking back at this chart and thinking back to what we had talked about in the beginning of this gap in compliance of $250 million, we see this spike in terms of the trajectory of Energy Star pass rates and this overall increase. So we kind of asked ourselves a question here, which is, okay, if we look at these trends, when will we get back to that total number of tax credits that we were as an industry capturing in 2022? How long will it take? And it's not a trivial answer. We've got to put together different growth scenarios. But what we did is we took the overall required percentage passing rate to hit those previous numbers. And we took 3 different growth scenarios for Energy Star pass rates. The current pace, 50% faster growth, and 100% faster growth. And the spread here is we'd be hitting those compliance, those capture rates, again, sometime 2027 all the way through 2031. So we are on a trajectory to be able to get there. Obviously, this is super rough analysis. These are just straight line extrapolations with some potential faster growth scenarios. So we're really just speculating. We don't know what may happen. There are also changes to the tax credit that will occur as the requirement goes from Energy Star 3.1 to 3.2 and whatnot. So we really don't know, but this is just one analysis of if these things happen and we continued on these rates, when we would get to those compliance numbers. And I think the story here is that it's actually quite a bit of a ways away. It's several years away, but we can get there, right? We are on a track that could get us there. So, how can the industry work together in order to close this gap? I think there are really 4 key stakeholder groups, at least 4 key stakeholder groups here. Obviously the builders, and our advice to builders would be partner with a HERS rating company to get more of your homes HERS rated and thereby increase the Energy Star percentages, or if not getting them HERS rated, just have a consultation, talk with your HERS rating company or find a HERS rating company. Ekotrope can also help on this front by providing dashboards and analysis and tracking and forecasting, and obviously by partnering with your HERS rater to help them give you solutions. Building product manufacturers really try to focus on the regions and builders that will see better Energy Star compliance by using your product, and understand that, right? Understand how your product fits in this whole sphere of 45L and how much impact you have and what types of builders are going to be benefiting most from your product. That's somewhere that we can help as well by helping understand the market and helping understand product impacts. We also always encourage interactions between product manufacturers and raters. Raters are a really good resource for product manufacturers. So just try to learn and understand where you fit in the space. Raters, I think, are obviously a real key element to this process. So the obvious part is help the builder by rating their homes to Energy Star, but beyond that, just helping in the analysis period, right? Helping your builders identify low-hanging fruit where they may not be meeting 45L, but they could be, and working with builders to strategize around getting those homes over the passing threshold for Energy Star. And Ekotrope can help here as well. We've got scenario modeling tools that can help you do that type of work more quickly. And then finally, for utilities, we'd recommend trying to leverage some of this 45L wave to benefit utility programs, right? So developing programs that coincide with and cooperate with these 45L requirements, because then a builder can more easily justify the investment in the energy efficiency measures that they're going to be putting into these homes to be able to get both the 45L and additional utility dollars. And Ekotrope can help on that as well. We have utility solutions for program submission workflow and developing design criteria for these programs. So just a quick recap on the takeaways here. Updated 45L tax credit has higher payout tiers than it ever has before, but it's also more stringent, and we're seeing reduced compliance numbers because of that. Energy Star 3.1 compliance is climbing. We're seeing that rate increase, but there would still be some time to get to those total compliance rates that we were seeing in 2022. But finally, compliance is within reach, right? There's a big chunk of homes, 46% of HERS ratings that are not getting certified to Energy Star, but they're either passing or they're within 5% of passing the performance targets. And so we need to plan around those Energy Star mandatory requirements. We need to do strategic upgrades to find cost-effective improvements where we can get these homes to passing for a net benefit for the builders, and leverage HERS ratings, rating organizations, and also Ekotrope as far as we can help to get there. So that's it from me. And I see a lot of questions have come in. It's 2:40, so we've got some time here to get through some of these questions. So I'm going to pause. And Sarah, let me know what's come through if there are any of these questions we want to try to get through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you, Sai. That was a great presentation. And yeah, we have a ton of questions here, so try to get through as many as we can. I'll just start from the top here. So kind of backtracking a bit towards the beginning of the presentation. As far as the incentives go, in that structure, are they cumulative? Would a unit that's both Energy Star compliant and DOE Zero Energy Ready received 7,500, or would it just get one or the other, just the higher amount?
Yep, great question, Owen. They are not cumulative, and I should have mentioned that in the beginning. So if you qualify for DOE Zero Energy Ready, that is $5,000, not $7,500.
Got it. Thank you. And next up, do you have any resources, or I guess does Ekotrope have any resources or maybe just some guidance side that you can share on how a nonprofit who would be the beneficiary of a 45L tax credit can then transfer the credit to another member of the development team?
That's a good question. And I don't think I'm equipped to answer it, unfortunately. So let's take that note, Sarah, and maybe we can get back to Stephen. I'm not a tax accountant, and so I don't want to give improper guidance here, and I don't know the answer. There may be a way to do it, but I'm not certain.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen, we'll get back to you on that. Maybe if you could email us, we'd be happy to kind of look into that and see what we can, ascertain for you as far as kind of transferring the credit goes in that situation. But next up, just kind of like some vocab. I feel like maybe not everyone on the call is aware. Sai, can you describe what ESG is and how we're using it in this context?
Yes, absolutely. So ESG is it's not a new topic, but it's kind of a trending topic in the building industry. It stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it's kind of you can think of it as a scorecard for rating the how good the societal benefits of a business, right? How good of a societal steward is a business, right? Are they operating with good policies and good ethics, or are they operating purely for a profit? And so many corporations these days are focusing on building their ESG portfolio, meaning doing a lot of activities and initiatives to try to improve that ESG score, and they're doing ESG reporting on it. And by doing so, they are able to appeal to different investors. So this is mostly relevant to public companies, but not exclusively to public companies. But for public companies, if they can boost that ESG reporting and credibility, they can appeal to investors who want to invest not only for a profit, but also to invest in good companies and growth of good companies. So that's an oversimplified way to explain it, but kind of gets the general concept. And in terms of the home building industry, we're seeing pretty much all of the top 20 builders, which generally represent the public builders, invest in ESG reporting, and it's a pretty big deal to them. They're investing in hiring, in personnel, in HERS ratings, in building better homes to boost this ESG portfolio. So it's a significant and positive trend for the HERS rating and energy industry here.
Great. Thank you for that, Sai. Next question is, I think, regarding kind of how we calculated the year-over-year drop in compliance. Jay, I think you're referring to that slide there. Correct me if I'm wrong in the Q&A box, but the 2022 to 2023 rebate numbers are based on different baselines and targets, correct? So I guess I'll explain a bit just how we kind of got to the $250 million drop in compliance that we're forecasting.
Yep. So for 2020, for homes sold in 2022, the criteria was completely different than in 2023. So in 2022, it was based on a ResNet standard where the home needed to be 50% more energy efficient than a 2006 home. Now the criteria is completely different. It's based on Energy Star 3.1, at least for that first tier, which is a target home that's been developed by EPA to specifically designed to be, above code by a certain percentage. So yeah, the criterias and baselines are completely different. So that's one reason for the change in compliance rates. But the other reason is that the process, the certification process is also different, right? Regardless of the performance threshold, previously there wasn't really a strict certification process, and now there is, because the home needs to be certified to Energy Star, which requires a registered rating.
Great. And then on compliance for 45L, since FIA certification encompasses Energy Star compliance, would a FIA certification constitute compliance, or do you have any insight on how FIAS and 45L interact, if there is overlap there, or they need to be kind of separate?
This is a good question. If a FIAS, if a passive house US certification also includes Energy Star, like if that automatically gives you an Energy Star certification, I was not aware of that. So I don't want to outright say that it doesn't, because I'm not a FIAS expert, but I wasn't aware that that a FIAS certification would also give you Energy Star 3.1 compliance. So I'm not sure I can fully answer that question. We may be able to get back to Spencer on that. But I wasn't aware that it did encompass that, if it does.
Got it. Thank you. And then someone asked, will the new 45L credit require 100% testing, or is sampling allowed?
That's a good question and a relevant one. Right now, sampling is technically allowed in the end. So all it really requires is, for that first tier, a certification to Energy Star 3.1. So from there, it all goes to what's the EPA guidance and what does the EPA allow for meeting Energy Star 3.1. Right now, sampling is allowed. However, in the past 2 weeks, I just saw some information come through from EPA that they're planning on sunsetting the sampling allowances and requiring all homes to get confirmed tested results. I just saw that briefly. I do not know when that would go into place, what the timing is, if it's even a definite change at this point. So right now, sampling, yes, but I think in the future, probably not.
Got it. Thank you. And thank you everyone for your questions. There are a ton here. We'll try to get through as many as we can. As I said, we still have a few minutes left though, so please forgive us if we aren't able to get to your question, and feel free to email us whether you'd like more clarification, or if we just didn't get to it. We do want to make sure we're able to give you guidance on this stuff. But continuing along, there's another question here on we mentioned scenario modeling a bit earlier. Someone asked, how does that tool work? And, can you elaborate on how it can actually be used by folks to close the 45L gap?
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't go into a ton of detail here, because I know there are a lot of questions, but scenario modeling basically allows Ekotrope users to take a wide set of possible changes and run them across a set of models. So if you want to understand what does it take to get, a big builder in the Southeast who builds 2,000 homes in that area and has 400 plans, what's it going to take to get them to 100% Energy Star 3.1? Manually, that's a pretty difficult exercise by determining what are these worst case plans and trying out changes one by one and trying to keep track of what are these different options. It just takes a lot of time and it's not very repeatable. And so scenario modeling is a tool that tries to make that a whole lot easier by allowing the user to define a set of changes, which might be, one spec change, it might be 5 spec changes combined into one scenario, and running those all at once against a wide swath of homes to get a matrix of results to understand, okay, if we make this change, what does that mean in terms of our Energy Star compliance for this builder's portfolio in this region? So that's the brief answer, but I'd encourage you, if you think it's something that's interesting for you, reach out to info@ekotrope.com is probably the right place. and we'll be happy to have a chat with you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Sai. And then another question here about Energy Star 3.2 and the move to that. Do you think that'll have a negative impact on the current trend line for compliance for 45L? I know that we didn't really mention it in this session today, but do you have insight on
Yep.
that? Do you think it's going to happen there?
Yeah, I do think it will. It will cause a bit of a downtick. We've seen this pattern before with Energy Star where it kind of goes in waves. So as Energy Star adopts a new program, there are going to be some builders that fall off because of the new requirements. There are going to be some builders that stick with it. And then, so there's going to be a bit of a dip in those compliance rates. And then over the next couple of years, as codes increase, as builders get more comfortable with new technologies and new approaches, then we start to see that adoption curve increase. So it's kind of like a zigzag increase line. So it's actually a fair point that was not included in the projections that we looked at, and that could actually extend the line a bit longer because we'll see a little bit of that zigzag as Energy Star 3.2 comes into play and other increases down the line. But I do still think, based on what we're seeing and the extra money that's being injected for 45L, I do think that line, if you look at it over 5 years, is going to continue to increase significantly past the market shares where we are today.
Great. And then another question here regarding kind of that pie chart we showed earlier with, there's that 30% that pass Energy Star performance, but they miss the mandatory requirements. Have you found any indicators as to what the most common reasons are that homes fail the mandatory requirements, if there are ones that stick out there?
That's a really good question, and I wish I had more data on this. I would definitely share it. I think it's an interesting insight for the industry. I can speculate some anecdotal stuff that I've heard, but I don't have any real strong data. And actually, it's probably regionally dependent. And I think, the answer for a given region would probably be best answered by raters that have field experience in that region, understanding what builders can do, what builders want to do, what they don't want to do. But some things that I've heard are that it's difficult for some builders to meet the advanced framing and or continue the advanced framing or continuous insulation requirements. Continuous insulation is definitely a difficult one. Advanced framing is kind of the workaround to that. But I know that for some builders, that's not an easy swap. It requires some process changes. Also, the HVAC requirements, having the credentialed HVAC contractor, I don't think that's a particularly difficult one, but if builders are working with HVAC contractors that they've been working with for a while and they don't typically go through that Energy Star process, or they're not comfortable with it, or they're not recommending it, that's going to result in a failure to be able to get the mandatory checklists checked as well. I know that also ventilation has been a difficult one, to get that ventilation dialed in and meeting the requirements and meeting what comes in on the design report from the HVAC contractor. So, those are some things that I've heard. I wish I had a good breakdown in terms of like percentages and what the biggest sticking points are. That might be a great area for follow-up research.
Absolutely. Great. Next question is kind of around the credit itself, and whether it's really a tax credit or more of a tax deduction. So does the builder get $2,500, or is it actually a reduction of $2,500 in taxable income if they meet that first tier for Energy Star compliance?
It's a credit. So it's a reduction of their tax liability. It's a reduction of their tax liability, not a reduction of their income for tax reporting purposes. So it is a true tax credit. I know that many builders are valuing this tax credit differently. So I've heard a lot of builders say the tax credit is $2,500, but it's not actually worth that to us as a business. It's worth $1,800 or it's worth $1,900 to us as a business. And that just kind of depends. That's going to be builder specific and how they think about their revenue and their taxes and what's valuable to their business and how they value decreased cost versus decreased tax liability versus increased revenue. And so I can't really speak for all builders in terms of how they're going to value that tax credit. To me, it should be valued at true $2,500. But a lot of builders are seeing it differently. And so that's a discussion to have with the builder, with the caveat that it's only valuable if there is a tax liability, right? So I know that there were some builders coming out of the 2008 cycle that just couldn't get any value from the tax credit because they didn't have profit to claim it against. But I think that's pretty uncommon these days.
Got it. Thank you for that explanation. And then looks like we only have like a minute or two left. So trying to do a roundup of kind of one last question or two to answer. Oh, this one, are projects that miss the December 31st, 2022 deadline under old 45L completely ineligible at this point? Do you know if that, if there's anything for those homes still, or is that kind of, washed over?
So as long as the home was quote unquote acquired before January 1 of this year, then it is going to be eligible under the old rules. So the builder doesn't have to have claimed the tax credit by 12/31/22. The home just needs to have been sold before then, and there's a window that the builder can claim that tax credit for that home under the old rules. I don't know how long that window is exactly. That would be dependent on the tax filing schedules for the builder. But there is a window, and I think it's pretty significant. So I guess the answer is they are still eligible at this point if they were sold, if they were acquired before Jan 1 of this year under the old rules.
Got it. Hey, thank you. Looks like that's pretty much all the time we have. We're right at the top of the hour here. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today and for submitting some really great questions. Like I said, if we weren't able to fully answer your question or you'd like, talk with us more about it, please reach out to us at info@ekotrope.com. We'd be happy to kind of work through those with you, as well as any questions that we just simply couldn't get to today. But yeah, thank you all for your really thoughtful questions. And thank you to Sai for the great presentation today and for answering all of those questions. I hope everyone learned a lot and got a lot of value out of this. Please be on the lookout. We'll send an email probably early next week that'll have the recording of this session as well as the slides so that you can review at your leisure. And have a great rest of your week and weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks everyone for attending. This was fun. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.